The entire crowd fell silent when the old billionaire woman suddenly dropped her cane and stumbled forward. Her trembling finger pointed straight at the poor girl being dragged across the marble floor by security. "Stop!" Grandma Vivian screamed, her voice cracking with a pain so deep it froze the entire hall. "Let me see her face." The girl's torn dress was dusty. Her sandals were broken. Tears burned in her eyes from humiliation as the guards forced her to her knees. But when she slowly lifted her face, Grandma Vivian gasped so violently her whole body shook, because staring back at her was the female reflection of her own grandson, CEO Grayson Langston. The same eyes, the same cheekbones, the same jawline. And in that horrifying moment, one impossible thought thundered through the old woman's mind. The baby they stole years ago is alive. Before we continue, tell me, if someone poor walked into your life looking exactly like your family, would you believe in fate or suspect a scam? And where are you watching from today? Drop your country in the comments. If you love powerful emotional stories with shocking twists, be sure to subscribe so you never miss the next one. Sienna had learned very young that poverty did not merely empty a stomach, it stripped a person in public. It made strangers feel licensed to speak to you as if you were dirt, as if hardship had erased your name and turned you into a warning for others. That morning, before she was dragged across polished marble and stared at like a criminal, she had already lived through 3 humiliations as the day began. The first came when the water stopped. She was standing barefoot in the narrow washing space outside the one-room shack she shared with Nadia, staring at the dry tap as if anger alone could force it back to life. Dawn had barely broken over the rusted roofs of the settlement. Thin smoke curled into the pale sky. Babies were crying somewhere nearby. Radios crackled through torn curtains. The muddy path outside their door was already filling with feet hurrying toward a day of survival. "Did it stop again?" Nadia asked weakly from inside. Her voice was soft now, too soft. Illness had eaten away the strength that used to fill it. Sienna turned quickly and forced brightness into her face before stepping back into the room. "Only for a moment. I will fetch some from the standpipe." The lie came easily, not because she enjoyed lying, but because truth had become too heavy for the sick. The room smelled of eucalyptus oil, damp walls, and medicine they could no longer afford in full doses. A thin curtain divided the sleeping space from the cooking corner. Their mattress sagged. Their metal trunk had one broken hinge. On the crate beside Nadia's bed sat a small paper bag with the last of her tablets folded carefully, as if neatness could multiply them. Nadia watched Sienna with tired eyes that still carried stubborn love. "You did not sleep." Sienna reached for the faded scarf hanging from a nail and tied it around her braids. "You did not either." Nadia tried to smile, but pain pulled at one side of her mouth. "You should not go to that rich people's event if the road is far." "I am not going to beg," Sienna said, sharper than she intended. Then she softened immediately, kneeling beside the bed. "I told you. One of the women from the catering staff promised me a small finder's fee if I returned the envelope her boss dropped yesterday. Maybe more work too. Just a delivery. That is all." Nadia's fingers, thin and warm, closed around her wrist. "Rich people make promises the way clouds make shadows. They do not always mean rain." Sienna almost laughed. Almost, but the truth sat like a stone in her chest. Rent was overdue. The landlord had already pounded on their metal door twice this week. The clinic wanted payment before the next round of treatment. And last night, Nadia had coughed blood into a cloth and hidden it under the bed as if Sienna would not notice. So yes, she was going. Not because she believed the wealthy woman who had smiled without seeing her. Not because she trusted the shining world behind the gates. She was going because medicine cost money, and love without money was often another form of helplessness. Later that morning, Sienna was balancing a tray of bean cakes on her head, weaving through traffic at the bus stop to sell breakfast before leaving for Victoria Island. Men in wrinkled shirts bought from her without meeting her eyes. A schoolgirl gave her an extra coin and whispered, "For your mother." An older woman tried to bargain over one cake as if crushing Sienna's profit by a few naira would lift her own burden. That was humiliation number 2, being needed by everyone and respected by no one. By the time she reached the estate gates where the event was being held, the city had fully woken into its usual roar. Black SUVs rolled in beneath white floral arches. Security guards stood upright in tailored uniforms. Women stepped out wearing silk that probably cost more than a year of rent in Sienna's neighborhood. Men laughed loudly, their watches flashing like little suns. Sienna paused outside the gate and looked down at herself. Her cleanest dress was still old, faded blue cotton mended twice at the hem. Her sandals had been glued at the straps. She had washed them the night before and rubbed cooking oil over the cracked leather to make them look less tired. But poverty had its own smell, its own visible language. It clung. One guard stepped into her path before she even reached the guest list table. Deliveries at the service entrance. "I am not delivering food," Sienna said evenly. "I am returning something that belongs to one of your guests." He looked at her face, then at her dress, and already his expression had decided what kind of story she belonged to. "Go around." She did, because arguing at the gate never worked. There was always another gate, another order, another chance to be reminded that people like her were permitted to serve but not arrive. At the side entrance, she waited for what felt like ages while uniformed staff rushed in and out carrying flower boxes, bottled water folders, and sound equipment. No one had time for her until a young event assistant glanced at the envelope in her hand. "What is that?" "The woman who came yesterday in a gold car dropped it outside the pharmacy road," Sienna replied. "She said if I brought it here this morning, someone would collect it and pay me what she promised." The assistant frowned. "Wait there." Sienna waited and waited. Then someone else came, a steward with sharp eyes and expensive shoes. He did not ask her name. He snatched the envelope, opened it, and his face changed. Money. A thick stack of it. His voice rose immediately. "Where did you get this?" "I told you. It was dropped yesterday, liar." Heads turned. Another guard moved closer. Two women from the catering team stopped whispering and stared openly. Humiliation number 3 arrived in full force, wearing outrage instead of doubt. Sienna felt heat flood her face. "I brought it back. Ask the woman who... She says she never saw you before in her life." The words landed like a slap. Sienna stared. "What?" The woman herself was now approaching in a cream dress, jewels at her ears, hand already pressed dramatically to her chest. "That girl," she said, pointing. "I knew it. I told you my envelope was missing yesterday. She must have followed my car." Sienna looked at her in disbelief. Yesterday, that same woman had smiled distractedly and said, "Bring it tomorrow. Someone will reward you." Sienna remembered every detail, the perfume, the red nails, the lazy voice. But now those eyes were cold and blank as if decency had evaporated overnight. "I returned what was yours," Sienna said. "You spoke to me yourself. I have no reason to speak to someone like you." The sentence was quiet, cruel, perfectly polished, and it cut deeper than shouting. The nearest guard grabbed Sienna by the arm. Instinct exploded through her. She jerked away so hard the tray cloth tied around her waist slipped loose and fell. A few remaining bean cakes rolled onto the floor, one stopping near the heel of a guest's white shoe. The woman recoiled as if filth had touched her. "I am not a thief," Sienna said louder now. People were gathering, not to help, to watch. That was how public shame worked. It created its own audience. The steward took a step toward her. "Then why were you carrying stolen money?" "Check the cameras." He blinked. Sienna repeated it louder. "Check the cameras. At the pharmacy road yesterday. At this entrance today. If I came here to steal, why would I bring the envelope in my own hand and ask for the person who lost it?" Somebody laughed softly. Another guest murmured, "She is bold for someone in her position." Her position. As if truth belonged to the wealthy and audacity to the poor was itself a crime. The guard seized her elbow again, harder this time. "Enough. Kneel and apologize before this gets worse." The courtyard went strangely still. Sienna looked at his hand on her arm, then slowly at his face. Something inside her rose. Not hope, not courage exactly. Something older, harder. The stubborn, last defense of a human soul cornered too often. "No." The word shocked even the people around her. The guard tightened his grip. "What did you say?" Sienna pulled her arm free and stood straighter, though her heart was pounding so hard it made her dizzy. "I said no. I will not kneel for something I did not do." The wealthy woman scoffed. "These slum girls have become shameless." Sienna turned to her, eyes burning. "No, we have become tired." The sentence hung there, sharp as broken glass. Even the catering women stopped moving. From the main drive, engines hummed. A line of luxury cars was arriving for the official opening. Staff hurried to attention. The guards suddenly looked torn between dragging Sienna away and performing their roles for the real royalty approaching. Sienna did not yet know that one of those cars carried the woman who would blow open her life. She only knew her breath was shaking. Her pride was the only thing still standing, and somewhere back in the settlement, Nadia was waiting for medicine Sienna might no longer be able to buy. The rich woman in cream folded her arms. "Throw her out." A guard reached for Sienna again, and just as his fingers closed around her sleeve, the long black limousine stopped at the foot of the marble steps. Doors opened, voices hushed, every back straightened because Mama Vivian had arrived. By the time the last guest had finished retelling the scene from the courtyard, the story had already changed shape 3 times. In one version, the poor girl had tried to snatch a donation envelope and run. In another, she had faked tears to manipulate an old woman known for her generosity. In the ugliest version, she had deliberately dressed in rags to win sympathy after being caught. Truth never traveled as fast as pride. Inside the Kane mansion that evening, the air was cool with expensive silence. Crystal lamps glowed over carved wooden panels. Soft music moved from hidden speakers. Silver trays passed from hand to hand. But underneath the polished calm, something had shifted. Mama Vivian had not touched her dinner. That alone unsettled everyone. She sat at the head of the long table in a deep emerald wrapper. Her back still straight despite age, her face unreadable except for the distant fire in her eyes. On either side of her, the family performed normalcy with the skill of people who had practiced it for years. Grayson, the public face of Kane Group, cut into his grilled fish with measured precision. Disciplined, elegant, and feared in boardrooms from Lagos to Nairobi, he wore control the way other men wore cologne. Even at home, nothing about him was careless. His cuffs were folded perfectly. His jaw remained calm. His voice, when he finally spoke, carried the clean edge of someone used to ending arguments before they grew legs. "You frightened the guests today, grandmother." Mama Vivian did not look at him. "Good." Across from him, Vanessa's fork paused halfway to her mouth. It was only a flicker. Tiny. The kind of reaction no outsider would catch. But Mama Vivian saw it. She saw everything. Vanessa recovered immediately and gave a low, graceful laugh. "Mama, the newspapers will feast on this if anyone speaks carelessly. The foundation launch should be remembered for education, not a scene at the gate." Education. How neatly rich people wrap shame in respectable words. Mama Vivian lifted her glass of water, but did not drink. "A girl was dragged like an animal in front of my guests. Should I have smiled and cut a ribbon?" Vanessa set down her fork. "That is not what I mean." "Then say what you mean." The room tightened. At the far end of the table, two younger cousins lowered their eyes. One of Mama Vivian's brothers pretended deep interest in his soup. Even the servants moved more quietly near the walls. Grayson leaned back slightly. "Grandmother, no one is defending mistreatment, but resemblance is not evidence. Lagos is full of faces that echo each other. It was a shocking moment, yes. That does not make it destiny." Mama Vivian finally turned to him. For a brief second, the hard CEO was simply a grandson being measured by the woman who had helped raise him. "You saw her." "I saw a frightened girl who happened to resemble me." "Happen?" Mama Vivian repeated softly. Grayson held her gaze. Yes, the word hung between them like a challenge. Mama Vivian looked away first, but only to stare at the empty chair beside the sideboard. The seat had no official meaning anymore. The family had stopped assigning meaning to it years ago. But in her mind, it remained occupied by ghosts, by her daughter, Ariana, by the baby who vanished before she could even be properly named in the family records. Years had passed, but grief did not measure time like calendars did. It measured by wounds reopened without warning, a laugh that sounded familiar, a scent carried by wind, a face appearing where no face should be. And that afternoon on the marble steps beneath the arches of her own foundation launch, she had looked into the eyes of a poor stranger and felt the dead pound against the walls of memory. She pushed her plate away. "I want the name of that girl." Vanessa moved too quickly. "Mama, surely there is no need to involve the household in some street coincidence." Again, too fast, too polished, Mama Vivian turned slowly toward her daughter-in-law. Vanessa was still beautiful in the disciplined way of women who had built power from presentations, smooth skin, elegant neck, perfect posture. Every word measured, every reaction edited. She had entered the Kane family years ago with charm and velvet humility. No one had noticed how quickly humility hardened into influence. No one except Mama Vivian. "There is need when I say there is need," the old woman replied. Vanessa smiled, but the skin around her mouth had tightened. "Of course." Grayson dabbed his lips with a napkin. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Mama Vivian did not answer at once. Instead, she let silence force everyone to wait. Then she said, "I am suggesting that I know my own blood." A spoon dropped somewhere near the service entrance. A servant flinched and bent immediately to retrieve it. Grayson's face remained controlled, but a threat of impatience entered his tone. "With respect, you are suggesting something impossible." "Impossible things are often just truths buried by arrogant people." "Grandmother, no." Her voice sharpened. "Do not speak to me as if I am some old woman chasing shadows, because age has softened my mind. My mind is the only reason half this family still eats from silver." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed too loudly. Grayson lowered his eyes for a second, not in surrender, but restraint. "Then tell me plainly, what do you believe?" Mama Vivian's fingers curled around the edge of the table. "I believe the child they told me was gone may never have died at all." The sentence entered the room like thunder. One cousin made a startled sound before catching himself. Mama Vivian's brother looked up sharply. Vanessa did not move, but all the blood drained from her face so quickly it was almost violent. There it was, not sorrow, not sympathy, fear. Grayson exhaled slowly through his nose, a habit he had when irritation threatened to show. "The accident happened years ago. The hospital records were clear, and Ariana died on impact. The infant disappeared in the chaos. Police searched, private investigators searched. Nothing was found, because someone wanted nothing found." His gaze hardened. "That is a very serious accusation, and still not as serious as what a mother feels when she is asked to mourn without a body." The words cracked through the dining room. Not loud, worse than loud, true, For a moment, even Grayson had no answer. Mama Vivian rose carefully from her chair. A servant stepped forward to assist her, but she waved him off. When grief speaks long enough, she said, the family begins to call it madness. It is convenient. Madness requires no investigation. She began walking slowly toward the wide windows overlooking the back gardens. Outside, fountains shimmered in soft gold light. Everything on the estate had been designed to suggest permanence, control, legacy. How little they knew of betrayal. Without turning around, she continued, that girl had your eyes, Grayson. He did not respond. She had Ariana's mouth, Mama Vivian said, and when they grabbed her arm, she did not cry for mercy. She looked at them the way your mother used to look at men who mistook cruelty for authority. That landed harder than she intended. Grayson stood, chair scraping lightly against the floor. He rarely spoke of his mother. Few in the house did. Ariana's death had become one of those family tragedies polished into a framed silence. Always respected, never touched. You are letting resemblance awaken pain, he said, and you are letting logic protect your comfort. Their eyes met across the room. Vanessa rose, then graceful as ever, stepping into the fracture before it widened. Please, this is reopening wounds for everyone. Grayson, your grandmother needs peace tonight, not debate. Mama Vivian turned. Do not tell me what I need. Vanessa stopped. I meant only I know what you meant. A servant entered quietly to refill glasses, then froze sensing the atmosphere and retreated without touching the tray. Mama Vivian returned to the table. Tomorrow, she said, I want the guest list, the security footage, and the names of every staff member present when that girl was accused. Grayson's expression changed by only a degree, but Mama Vivian saw that too. He was no longer merely skeptical, he was now alert. Because if she was asking for footage and names, she was no longer operating from emotion alone. This had become an inquiry. Why? Vanessa asked too quickly again. Mama Vivian looked at her with almost gentle cruelty. Because, my dear, honest people do not panic when old files are opened. No one spoke. The family dinner was over, though the plates still sat half full. Grayson was the first to move. I will have the security office send the footage. Vanessa turned to him sharply. You cannot be serious. He glanced at her. If grandmother wants clarity, clarity costs less than rumor. It was a businessman's answer. Practical, neutral. But Mama Vivian knew it was something else too. He had seen Vanessa's face when the past was mentioned. He had noticed. Good. Later that night, long after the household had gone quiet, Mama Vivian sat alone in her private sitting room with a locked wooden box on her lap. Inside were fragments of a life the family preferred to keep buried. Ariana's letters, a hospital bracelet, a photograph faded at the edges, and beneath them, all wrapped in cloth, a tiny gold pendant shaped like a rising sun. The pair had been specially made, one for the baby, one kept by the family. Mama Vivian stared at the pendant until her vision blurred. Then she whispered into the silence, not knowing whether she was speaking to God, to grief, or to the daughter she still missed with every breath. If that child is alive, who lied to me? Somewhere else in the mansion, behind a locked bedroom door, Vanessa was no longer pretending calm. She stood with her phone pressed tightly to her ear, voice lowered to a furious hiss. I do not care what it costs, she said. Find out who that girl is tonight. She listened. Then her face hardened even more. And if anyone from the past still has loose lips, she added, silence them before Mama Vivian reaches them first. Later, Lagos moved as it always did, loud, impatient, glittering in one corner, while hunger waited in another. But for Sienna, the city felt changed, not because her life had improved, because humiliation had a way of lingering on the skin. Every time she closed her eyes, she still saw the marble courtyard, the women staring, the guard's hand on her arm, the rich guest denying she had ever spoken to her. Worst of all, she saw the old woman in emerald standing at the foot of the steps, staring as if Sienna were not a stranger, but a ghost pulled back into flesh. She had not understood that look. She did not like that she kept thinking about it. As the day wore on, the settlement was thick with heat. The zinc roofs trapped it. The drains smelled sour. Children chased one another between puddles left by a leaking pipe. A mechanic nearby hammered metal with rhythmic violence. Somewhere farther down the lane, a preacher shouted into a cheap speaker about judgment, mercy, and the wages of sin. Inside the one-room shack, Nadia was asleep at last. Her breathing was shallow, but steady. Sienna stood over her for a moment, adjusting the thin cloth over her chest. The old woman's face had sharpened even more in the past week. Illness had stripped her softness away, leaving bones, eyes, and stubbornness. On the wooden crate beside the mattress sat a cup of cool tea and half a tablet Sienna had broken to make the supply stretch. Half a tablet, half the right dose, half a chance. Sienna turned away before the anger in her throat became tears. A knock sounded against the metal doorframe. Not the landlord's pounding, not the casual tap of a neighbor. 2 measured knocks. Sienna stiffened immediately. Poverty trained people to recognize danger by sound alone. She stepped outside and pulled the door half closed behind her. In the narrow lane stood a woman in dark glasses and a crisp linen dress that looked absurdly clean against the mud walls and hanging laundry around her. Beside her was a man holding a tablet and a small leather folder. Neither belonged there. Their shoes said so before their mouths did. "Sienna?" the woman asked. Sienna did not answer at once. "Who wants to know?" The woman removed her glasses. Her expression was not rude, but it carried the smooth authority of someone used to being obeyed quickly. "My name is Ivy. I work for Mama Vivian Kane." The name landed heavily. Sienna's face cooled. "Then tell Mama Vivian Kane I do not steal and I do not perform for rich families who enjoy strange games." The man beside Ivy shifted awkwardly. Ivy herself remained composed. "She does not believe you stole anything. Then why am I being visited like a suspect?" "She would like to speak with you." Sienna almost laughed. "Yesterday your people watched me get dragged like a criminal. Today I am invited." She was not pleased by what happened. Sienna folded her arms. Rich displeasure does not pay clinic bills. The line seemed to strike more deeply than she expected. Ivy glanced toward the closed door behind Sienna, then back at her face. "We understand your mother is unwell." Sienna's shoulders hardened. "Do not say that, like you understand anything." The mechanic down the lane had stopped hammering. Two women washing clothes nearby were pretending not to listen while missing nothing. Sienna lowered her voice. "You should leave." Ivy hesitated, then reached into the leather folder and withdrew a card. "Mama Vivian is at St. Catherine's private hospital today, visiting a foundation partner. If you change your mind, come there. She said to tell you this is about the pendant you were wearing yesterday." That froze something inside Sienna. Very slightly, very dangerously, her hand moved almost unconsciously to the chain beneath her dress. Ivy noticed. So did Sienna, and she hated that anyone from that family had managed to notice what she herself guarded most carefully. "I said leave," Sienna repeated. This time Ivy nodded. She placed the card on the windowsill beside the door instead of forcing it into Sienna's hand. Then she and the man turned and walked back toward the waiting SUV at the end of the lane, the muddy ground splashing against tires too expensive for that neighborhood. Only after they were gone did the two women nearby begin whispering openly. "Private hospital," one murmured. "Maybe she really knows those rich people, or maybe she has trapped herself in something bigger." Sienna ignored them. She snatched the card from the sill and stepped inside, bolting the door. For a long moment, she simply stood there. Then she pulled the chain from under her collar. The pendant rested against her palm, small old gold rubbed thin at the edges by years of skin and weather. A rising sun, not ornate, not heavy, but unlike anything else they owned. She had asked Nadia about it many times while growing up. "Where did it come from? Who gave it to me? Why did you never sell it when we had nothing?" Nadia always gave the same answer. "It belonged to you before you belonged to me." As a child, Sienna had found that answer magical. As a woman, she found it unsettling. Later, Nadia was awake again and trying to sit up. "You are restless," she said, studying Sienna's face. Sienna poured water into a cup. Some people came. Nadia's hand tightened on the blanket. "What people?" "From the Kane family." The silence that followed was too immediate, too sharp. Sienna noticed at once. Nadia took the cup with fingers that trembled more than usual. "Why?" "They said the old woman wants to speak to me." "About this." Sienna showed her the pendant. For the briefest second, fear flashed across Nadia's face like lightning. It vanished so fast another person might have missed it. Sienna did not. "You know something," she said quietly. Nadia looked down into the water. "I know only that trouble has finally remembered our address." "That is not an answer." "No." Nadia lifted her eyes. "It is a warning." Sienna knelt beside her. "Mama." Whenever she used that word instead of Nadia, the older woman's features softened despite herself. Sienna kept her voice gentle. "Yesterday, that family looked at me like I had fallen out of the sky. Today, they send a polished woman and a car into this place to find me. And when I mention the pendant, you look frightened. Tell me what I am walking into." Nadia's mouth parted, then closed again. Pain crossed her face, not physical pain this time, but something older and more punishing. Before she could speak, a violent coughing fit seized her. Sienna caught her shoulders, held the cup aside, and waited until it passed. When Nadia leaned back again, exhausted, sweat glistened along her temples. "You need the hospital?" Sienna whispered. Nadia gave a weak half-smile. "And you need the truth. Yet look at us. Neither can afford what is needed." The words pierced her. Sienna stood up too fast and moved away before her grief became rage. Later, she had made her decision. Not because she trusted Mama Vivian, because uncertainty was becoming its own cruelty. She took a bus to St. Catherine's, one hand on her bag, the other curled around the pendant under her dress. The private hospital rose from the city like a promise made to people with money. White stone walls, manicured shrubs, spotless glass. Even the air smelled different near the entrance. Cold, controlled, safe for some, never meant for all. Sienna felt the usual resistance in her body the moment she approached places like that. Her spine straightened, her jaw locked. Every instinct told her to prepare for insult. Inside the lobby gleamed. Nurses moved briskly behind a polished reception desk. Family members sat on curved sofas speaking in muted voices. A pianist in the corner played something soft and unnecessary. Ivy was already waiting. "This way," she said. Sienna did not answer. She followed. They passed the main wing and moved toward a quieter corridor lined with framed photographs from foundation events, school openings, immunization drives, women smiling beside sewing machines, executives handing giant checks to people who looked grateful because poverty often had to smile for funding. At the end of the corridor, near a private garden court, Ivy stopped. Mama Vivian stood by a bench beneath a flowering tree dressed in ivory, this time one hand resting on a cane. Sunlight filtered through the leaves and broke across her silver head wrap. She looked less like a billionaire in that moment than a woman carrying too much history in her bones. When she turned and saw Sienna, her breath caught again. That same look, recognition without reason, pain without permission. Sienna stayed where she was. "You wanted to see me." Mama Vivian dismissed Ivy with a small motion. The assistant withdrew out of earshot. For a few seconds, neither woman spoke. Then Mama Vivian said very softly, "Come closer." Sienna did not move. "Why?" The old woman swallowed. "Because yesterday I thought grief was playing games with my eyes. Today I need to know whether I was wrong." Sienna almost turned around right then. But Mama Vivian's voice did not sound cruel. It sounded frightened. That was new. Rich people were many things around the poor, dismissive, amused, irritated, fake kind. They were rarely afraid. Slowly, Sienna stepped nearer. Mama Vivian's gaze moved over her face with unbearable intensity. Brow, eyes, nose, mouth, chin, not like a socialite judging someone, like a witness reading a language she thought had died. Then her eyes dropped to the pendant. "May I see it?" she asked. Sienna's entire body went tight. "No." Mama Vivian lifted her head. There was no offense in her face, only patience stretched thin by emotion. "Please." The word startled Sienna more than an order would have. Still, she hesitated. Then, with visible reluctance, she drew out the chain and opened her palm. The tiny gold sun lay there between them. Mama Vivian stared at it. Her fingers began to shake. She reached into the pocket of her wrapper with her free hand and withdrew something wrapped in a square of old cloth. Carefully, almost reverently, she unfolded it. Inside was another pendant. Same size, same design, same rising sun. Sienna felt the world around her go silent. The hospital corridor, the garden, the distant piano, everything seemed to fall away. Mama Vivian looked from one pendant to the other, and when she spoke, her voice broke on the last word. There were only two ever made. Sienna did not realize she had stepped backward until the edge of the bench struck the back of her legs. Her fingers closed around her pendant so tightly, the metal bit into her palm. Across from her, Mama Vivian stood motionless beneath the flowering tree, holding the twin pendant like evidence pulled from a grave. For a long moment, neither woman breathed like normal people. "There were only two ever made," Mama Vivian repeated quieter now, as if saying it softly might make it less dangerous. Sienna's first instinct was not wonder. It was anger, because poor people learned early that the rich often mistook intrusion for concern. They arrived with drivers, assistants, soft voices, and questions that cut deeper than knives. They called it help when they stepped into a wound and demanded to know how it was made. Sienna closed her hand around the chain and shoved it back beneath her dress. "If this is some kind of joke, it is cruel." Mama Vivian lifted her chin. "I do not joke about my dead." The sentence carried weight. Old grief, private ruin. It should have softened Sienna. Instead, it made her more guarded. "Then tell me plainly why you are looking at me like I owe your family an answer." Mama Vivian's face changed slightly. Not with offense, but with the recognition that she was not standing before a frightened child. Sienna's poverty was visible. So was her pride. One did not erase the other. "I am looking at you," the old woman said, "because years ago my daughter died in what I was told was a tragic accident. Her baby disappeared that same night. And now you stand in front of me with her face stitched into yours and half of a pear I buried in my heart." Sienna stared. The private hospital garden suddenly felt too bright. "No," she said instinctively, because some truths were too large to enter a life without resistance. "No. You cannot say things like that to someone and expect, 'What do you know about where you came from?'" The question cut across her protest. Sienna froze. Mama Vivian had not raised her voice. She did not need to. That question alone was enough to shake the air between them. Very slowly, Sienna answered. I know what my mother told me. Your mother. My mother, Sienna repeated firmly. Mama Vivian nodded once, accepting the correction with more grace than Sienna expected. What did she tell you? That she found me, where she never gave the same answer twice. It slipped out before Sienna meant it to. She hated that. Hated the crack of vulnerability opening in front of this woman from a world of gates and marble and private wings. But once spoken, the truth remained. Mama Vivian's grip on her cane tightened. Why not? Because every time I asked, she looked frightened. There, another truth, another crack. The old woman studied her face. And that never troubled you? Sienna gave a short, bitter laugh. Do you know what troubles poor children first? Hunger, school fees, rent, medicine, being mocked for your shoes, wondering if you were born from love comes much later. Mama Vivian flinched, only slightly, but Sienna saw it. Good, she thought. Let the rich hear what survival sounds like when it is not softened for their comfort. A nurse passed at the far end of the corridor, glanced toward them, then quickly away. Ivy remained a discreet distance off, pretending to review something on her phone while missing nothing. Mama Vivian lowered herself carefully onto the bench. For the first time since Sienna had met her, she looked not powerful, but old. Old in the honest way, bone deep, a woman whose wealth had failed to protect the people she loved most. Sit, she said. Sienna did not. I would rather stand. As you wish. Mama Vivian placed the matching pendant back into its cloth and folded it with precise hands. I am not asking you to believe me today. I am asking you not to run from questions that may belong to you. Sienna's throat tightened. Questions are expensive. They change things. Yes, my mother is sick. I know. No, Sienna shot back, anger rising again. You do not know. You know the polished version. You know enough to send assistants into poor neighborhoods with soft voices. You do not know what it means to count tablets, to pray a landlord is too drunk to come pounding tonight, to hear someone you love coughing behind a curtain and wonder which bill you can postpone so she stays alive one more week. Mama Vivian said nothing. That silence should have frustrated Sienna. Instead, it gave her more room to keep going. She is the one who raised me, the one who stayed, the one who went hungry so I could eat. So, if you are about to tell me some grand story about blood and family and fate, understand this first. I will not let rich people arrive now and speak about belonging as if belonging is something you can inherit without earning. The words rang out sharply enough that even Ivy looked up. Mama Vivian did not defend herself. She looked at Sienna for a long, unbroken moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice was lower. You are right. That answer unsettled Sienna more than argument would have. The old woman went on. Blood is not virtue. Wealth is not love. And a family name cannot feed a child abandoned to dust. If what I fear is true, then my family failed you before you could even speak. Something in Sienna's chest moved against her will. She crushed it immediately. And if what you fear is not true, then I will still know that someone in my house treated an innocent girl with contempt, and I will answer for that. Sienna folded her arms. Answer how? Mama Vivian's eyes sharpened. By beginning with the truth. The old woman reached into her handbag and withdrew a small envelope. She placed it on the bench between them. Sienna did not touch it. What is that? Clinic information. A specialist at this hospital. An appointment slot today if your mother can be brought before evening. Sienna's stare turned cold. So, now we are here. Here. The part where money enters and suddenly I am expected to become cooperative. Mama Vivian's mouth tightened slightly. If I wanted silence, child, I would have offered much more. The honesty of that answer was almost offensive. Sienna looked at the envelope again. Medicine, tests, maybe treatment, maybe more days, more weeks. A chance. And there it was, the oldest cruelty in poor lives. Pride and need standing face to face, neither willing to blink. I do not want your charity, then call it my obligation. I did not ask for it. No, Mama Vivian said. Life asked on your behalf. Sienna hated how close those words came to tenderness. Her eyes burned, but she kept her face hard. And what do you expect in return? Nothing you do not choose. Mama Vivian paused. But I would like you to come to my home tomorrow. Sienna almost laughed in disbelief. Your home? Yes, the same house full of people who looked at me as if I had crawled in from the gutter. Mama Vivian's gaze did not waver, especially that house. A small silence followed. Then Sienna said, Your grandson thinks I am a scam. Mama Vivian's expression shifted, almost amused despite everything. My grandson thinks caution is intelligence. It is one of his more exhausting habits. That nearly startled a smile out of Sienna. Nearly. She pressed her lips together instead. The old woman continued on. Look into the faces of those who fear questions. Then decide whether you want any part of what may come next. Sienna shook her head. You make it sound simple. It is not simple. Mama Vivian rose again with visible effort. It may be ugly. Truth often is. She took one step closer. Not enough to invade, enough to be heard clearly. If you come, come as yourself, not as a beggar, not as a guest grateful to be noticed. Come as someone who has every right to demand answers. That did something dangerous to Sienna's heartbeat. Before she could respond, footsteps approached from the corridor. Fast, controlled, male Grayson. He rounded the corner in a charcoal suit, phone in one hand, impatience already set in his shoulders. He stopped the instant he saw Sienna standing beside his grandmother in the private garden. His gaze dropped to Sienna's face, then rose again, unreadable. For a split second, the resemblance between them hit with fresh force in full daylight. Same eyes, same line of jaw, same tension when cornered. Grayson recovered first. "Grandmother," he said evenly, though his voice carried warning now. "I was told you were resting." Mama Vivian did not move. "I changed my plans." His eyes shifted to the envelope on the bench, then back to Sienna. Clearly. Sienna straightened. She had seen men like him all her life, tailored, skeptical, trained to smell risk before humanity. But there was something colder about Grayson. Not cruelty, control, the kind that could dismiss a person without raising its voice. He addressed his grandmother, not Sienna. "May I speak with you privately?" "No." Grayson's jaw flexed once. "Then I will speak plainly here. We do not know this girl." Sienna's temper flared instantly. "Then stop talking about me as if I am not standing here." His gaze snapped to hers, and there it was, not contempt this time, recognition followed immediately by resistance. Good, Sienna thought. Let him feel it too. Mama Vivian picked up the envelope and placed it in Sienna's hand before Grayson could object. "Tomorrow," she said. Sienna looked at the paper, then at the old woman, then finally at the CEO, whose face echoed her own like an accusation neither of them wanted. Trouble had not just remembered her address. It had learned her name. By the time Sienna reached the settlement again, the sun had already begun to lean west, throwing long bars of orange light across the broken roofs and muddy lanes. Children still played in the dust. Women still argued over water buckets. Men still sat on overturned crates, pretending exhaustion was rest. The world had the indecency to look ordinary. But inside Sienna, nothing was ordinary anymore. She kept feeling the weight of the envelope in her hand as if it was something alive. St. Catherine's Specialist Consultation, Emergency Admission Review, a name, a time, a number, to call the kind of paper people in her neighborhood only saw when someone was already dying or already saved. She hated that it had come from Mama Vivian. She hated more that she needed it. At the Clinic Road junction, she stopped and stood for a few seconds beside the noise of honking tricycles and shouting vendors. A bus brushed too close to the curb. A boy carrying oranges shouted prices into the traffic. A beggar woman rocked a baby on her hip while staring at nothing. Sienna pressed the envelope flat against her palm. Pride was a beautiful thing until someone you loved needed medicine more than dignity. When she reached home, the door was half open. Her body went cold. She rushed inside. Nadia was sitting upright on the bed, one hand pressed to her chest, the other bracing against the wall. A metal basin on the floor held water stained pink. Blood. Not much. Too much. Mama. Sienna dropped to her knees beside the bed and caught her before she could slip sideways. Nadia's skin was clammy. Her breathing came in quick, shallow pulls as if the air itself had become expensive. "I am fine," the older woman whispered. "No, you are not." Sienna grabbed the cloth hanging over the chair and wiped the corner of Nadia's mouth with trembling fingers. Anger rose in her so suddenly it felt like fever. Anger at illness, at landlords, at the people who denied envelopes in the morning and offered hospital appointments in the afternoon. Anger at every choice that was never really a choice for the poor. "We are going," she said. Nadia shook her head weakly. "Too much money." "I said we are going." Nadia looked at the envelope in Sienna's hand and went still. Her eyes changed first, then her whole face. A recognition. A dread. "Who gave you that?" Sienna's breath caught. "The old woman. Mama Vivian." Nadia's fingers dug into the blanket. "No, it is for St. Catherine's." She arranged no, stronger this time. Frightened. "You must not go back to those people." Sienna stared. "Go back? You say it like I have already come from them." Nadia tried to sit straighter, but pain twisted through her ribs and forced a grimace from her. "Listen to me. Some doors must stay closed no matter how much gold is on the other side." Sienna's voice dropped. "Then tell me what is behind that door." Silence. Outside, someone laughed in the lane. A radio blared an old love song. A baby cried. Everyday sounds, indifferent and cruel, leaking through thin walls while two lives inside the room tilted towards something neither could stop. Nadia looked away first. That told Sienna enough. "You do know something." Nadia closed her eyes. "You have always known." "No." The answer came fast but weakly. "Not always." Sienna stood up so abruptly, the stool beside the bed tipped over. "Then, when did you learn? Was I a child? Did you hold it in while I asked who I looked like? While people mocked me for being different? while I wore this pendant around my neck, not knowing it might belong to someone who searched for me. Nadia's eyes filled, but Sienna was too wounded to soften. The older woman reached for her hand. Sienna stepped back. That hurt both of them. Deeply. Nadia swallowed hard. Sit. No. Sienna, no. Her voice broke now, but she kept going. No more half answers. No more stories shaped like smoke. You owe me truth. The word "owe" settled over the room like judgment. Nadia bowed her head. When she finally spoke, her voice was so quiet Sienna had to lean in despite herself. It was raining the night I found you. Not found. The phrasing scraped against Sienna at once, but she said nothing. Nadia continued, eyes on the floor. A bad rain, the kind that turns roads into rivers and makes people run with their heads down. I had just finished cleaning the back corridor of a private clinic. Not St. Catherine's, another one, smaller, owned through family ties by rich people who like to keep certain things away from the public eye. Sienna felt her heartbeat rise. I was walking home when I heard shouting near the service road. A man and a woman. Not the kind of shouting poor people do in public. This was quiet rage, careful rage, dangerous rage. Nadia pressed a fist lightly to her chest. I hid beside the drainage wall, because people like me were not supposed to witness arguments like that. What did you hear? Enough to know a child was at the center of it. Sienna's skin prickled. Nadia licked dry lips before continuing. The woman was furious. The man kept saying it had already gone too far. Then I heard a baby cry. One cry only. Sharp. Alive. Then the woman said, "Finish it tonight." The room seemed to lose air. Sienna whispered, "Who was she?" Nadia closed her eyes as if the answer itself had claws. I did not see her face clearly that night. Only her voice, her perfume, her shoes when lightning flashed. Then how do you know it was connected to me? Because after they drove away, I heard you again. Sienna could not move. Nadia looked at her, then really looked at her with all the guilt she had swallowed for years rising into the open. You were wrapped in a wet cloth beside the drainage stones, not laid there by accident. Dropped there, like trash someone feared to carry longer. Her voice cracked, but you were alive, cold, angry, fighting. Sienna felt something split behind her ribs. She had spent her whole life imagining mystery. Not this, never this. Nadia's tears slid down slowly, carving tired paths through the lines illness had deepened in her face. There was a tiny stitch symbol on the blanket, a rising sun, and around your neck this. She touched the chain beneath Sienna's dress with trembling fingertips. I thought if I took you to the police, whoever abandoned you would claim you first. And if the woman I heard truly wanted you dead, then reporting you was the same as returning you. Sienna opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her mind raced ahead of her breathing. You said the woman, not the people. Nadia looked ashamed. Because later I saw her. Sienna went still. When? Sometime later. I was cleaning at an estate function. She arrived in a silver car. Beautiful. Calm. Rich in the way only dangerous look when they are sure nobody can touch them. Nadia's fingers trembled against the blanket. I recognized the perfume first. Then the shoes. Same style, same sharp heel, same voice. Who? Nadia's eyes flooded. I did not know her name then. That is not what I asked. Before Nadia could answer, another coughing fit struck worse this time, deeper, tearing through her body so violently. Sienna lunged forward to hold her upright. Nadia coughed into the cloth Sienna pressed to her lips. When she pulled it away, there was more blood. Sienna's anger vanished under terror. Enough. No more waiting, no more wounded pride, no more trying to separate truth from treatment. She grabbed the old bag from beneath the crate and began stuffing in a wrapper documents. Nadia's pills, the kettle cup, anything they might need. Nadia clutched at her wrist weakly. No hospital. Yes, hospital. They will ask questions. Let them. You do not understand. If those people know, they already know something. Sienna snapped, then lowered her voice when Nadia flinched. Mama, they know enough to send for me, enough to match the pendant, enough to look at me like I am a ghost from their own house. Nadia's face crumpled. Not because Sienna was wrong, because she was right. Too late. They will take you from me, the older woman whispered. The sentence shattered something inside Sienna more completely than any revelation so far. She dropped to her knees beside the bed and took Nadia's face in both hands. No, she said fiercely. Listen to me. Nobody takes me from you. Not rich people, not blood, not the past. Do you hear me? You raised me. You stayed. You are my mother, even if you did not birth me. Nadia sobbed once, the sound small and broken. Sienna leaned her forehead against hers. For a moment, they stayed like that. Grief and love pressed together in a room too poor for secrets this large. Then Sienna pulled back. But if you love me, you will stop hiding. You will live long enough to tell me everything. Nadia looked at the bag, at the envelope, at Sienna's face. Fear battled exhaustion. Love lost? Barely. Help me up, she whispered. It took time to get her into a taxi because no ambulance was coming for women from their lane unless a camera crew followed it. Sienna borrowed money from a neighbor for the ride, ignoring the woman's suspicious questions. She wrapped Nadia in 2 shawls, though the evening was warm, and half carried her to the roadside, while men watched and did not offer help until the weight became visible. The taxi driver complained about stains before he complained about traffic. Sienna nearly struck him. She did not because Nadia's head was on her lap, and survival required choosing battles that kept people breathing. As the taxi jolted into the road toward St. Catherine's Lagos, flashing and snarling around them, Nadia's fingers found Sienna's wrist again. "There is one more thing," she whispered. Sienna bent low. "What?" Nadia's eyes fluttered heavy with pain and memory. "The woman from that night." She swallowed with effort. "I learned her name years later." Sienna held her breath. Nadia's next words came out ragged but clear enough to turn the inside of the taxi to ice. It was Vanessa. St. Catherine's did not welcome the poor gently. It welcomed them with forms, glass doors, polished floors, and the quiet humiliation of being measured before being treated. At the emergency intake desk, Sienna could feel the receptionist's eyes move from Nadia's worn wrapper to the borrowed taxi shawl, then to the envelope from Mama Vivian that Sienna pushed across the counter like a weapon she hated needing. Everything changed at once. The receptionist straightened. The nurse beside her glanced at the letterhead and lowered her voice. Someone made a call. A wheelchair appeared. A doctor came faster than doctors usually came for women from neighborhoods like Sienna's. That alone filled Sienna with bitter gratitude. Money had not yet touched her hand, but it had already changed the speed of mercy. Nadia was wheeled through double doors under the hospital lights while Sienna followed, clutching the strap of her bag so tightly her fingers ached. The corridor smelled of antiseptic and polished air. Machines beeped behind closed curtains. Somewhere nearby, a child cried in short, exhausted bursts. Nurses moved with the brisk efficiency of people paid to hurry without panicking. "Family?" a nurse asked. "Yes," Sienna said at once. The nurse nodded, then hesitated over a clipboard. "Rosa?" Sienna looked through the glass panel at Nadia being lifted carefully onto a bed. "Yes," she said again. No blood test in the world could change that answer. Within an hour, Nadia had been examined, put on oxygen, and admitted for scans. Sienna sat rigid in a chair outside the treatment room, too tense to feel the pain in her own back. She had not eaten since dawn. Her head throbbed from heat, fear, and the taxi fumes still trapped in her lungs. Yet her mind would not slow. Vanessa. The name had landed in the cab like a thrown blade. Vanessa. Elegant, controlled, sharp-heeled, the woman from the stormy night. The woman Nadia had seen again years later at an estate function. The same Vanessa who now sat at the center of the Kane family like polished poison. Sienna was still staring at the floor when a pair of men's shoes stopped in front of her. Expensive leather, impatient stillness. She looked up. Grayson. He stood in a dark suit with his jacket unbuttoned, phone in one hand, the other resting at his side with the restrained tension of someone who had arrived fast and resented needing to show it. Behind him, Ivy stood quietly, eyes scanning the corridor. For 1 second, Sienna said nothing. She was too tired to hide her dislike. Grayson spoke first. "How is she?" The question was so direct it unsettled her. "Alive," Sienna said, "thanks to the piece of paper your grandmother gave me." His expression tightened faintly at the edge. "You are welcome." Sienna let out a small, humorless laugh. "I was not thanking you." Ivy glanced down. Grayson, to his credit, did not snap back. Instead, he looked through the glass toward the treatment bay. "Has the doctor said anything?" "They are still running tests." He nodded once, businesslike, then turned to Ivy. "Stay with the admitting office. Make sure billing delays nothing." Sienna's eyes hardened immediately. "I said I do not want charity." Grayson looked back at her. "This is not about your pride. It is always about pride when rich people decide how help should be given." The line sat between them sharply. Grayson seemed to weigh 10 different responses and discard 9. "Fine," he said at last. "Call it efficiency. My grandmother asked for care. I am making sure it happens." Sienna crossed her arms. "Why are you here?" He gave the answer too quickly. "Because I do not like unanswered questions. Or because I might embarrass your family if I die in your hospital corridor." That one landed. His jaw shifted. "If I cared about appearances first, you would not be sitting here." Before Sienna could answer, a door opened behind them, and Mama Vivian emerged from a private consultation room with a physician in a white coat. She had clearly already been in the building. Of course she had. People like her did not arrive at hospitals uncertainly. They arrived as institutions. When she saw Sienna, her face softened with visible relief. "And Nadia? Being treated?" Sienna replied. Mama Vivian nodded and thanked the doctor with a quiet authority that made the man look more deferential than any white coat usually allowed. Once he left, she turned fully toward Sienna. "Did she say anything more on the ride?" Sienna went still. Grayson noticed at once. More about what Mama Vivian's gaze flicked to him, then back to Sienna. She understood immediately that something had changed. Nadia, name someone, Sienna said. The old woman's hand tightened around her cane. Who? Sienna did not enjoy the fear that crossed Mama Vivian's face, but she did not trust fear that came easily from the rich. Too often, it was just a performance to control the next scene. She said the woman she heard the night I was abandoned. The woman she later recognized at an estate event. Sienna swallowed hard. She said it was Vanessa. The corridor seemed to freeze. Even Ivy stopped moving. Grayson stared at her, not with disbelief exactly, but with the sudden stillness of a man watching a crack form inside a building he thought he understood. That is a serious accusation, he said quietly. Sienna's temper flared despite exhaustion. People keep saying that, as if seriousness makes lies more frightening than truth. Mama Vivian lifted a hand not to silence her, but to steady the moment. Did Nadia explain how she knew? She recognized her years later by her voice, her perfume, her shoes. Sienna laughed bitterly. Apparently wealthy women leave signatures too. Grayson looked away for a second, thinking fast. Sienna could almost hear the internal machinery, the legal mind, the strategic mind, the son of legacy, calculating risk, motive, evidence. When he faced her again, the cold polish was still there, but something else had entered it now. Attention. Real attention. Is Nadia strong enough to repeat that to a doctor? Or to legal counsel if needed? Sienna stepped toward him at once. She is strong enough to breathe. That is all I need from her tonight. Grayson accepted the rebuke. Barely. A statement matters. She is not your witness. That hit harder than he expected. Mama Vivian spoke before the class sharpened. Enough. Her voice did what wealth often could not. It restored order by force of history alone. She turned to Grayson. Get the old records. I already started. Sienna looked at him sharply. He met her gaze. After yesterday, I requested internal security copies from the foundation venue, and today I had our archives office reopen the files from Ariana's accident. Mama Vivian's eyes narrowed slightly. Without telling me, I wanted facts before panic. The old woman gave a grim, joyless smile. You speak like a man who has not yet learned that facts can panic all by themselves. He ignored that. The original police report was thinner than it should have been. Too thin. A missing infant in a family like ours should have created a paper trail miles deep. Instead, there are gaps. What kind of gaps? Mama Vivian asked. Grayson glanced once at Sienna as if deciding whether to say it in front of her. Then he did. The hospital security log from the night of the accident has 2 overwritten entries. A section of CCTV was marked corrupted. The private driver assigned to Vanessa that week abruptly resigned days later and vanished from payroll records. And the head of estate security at the time, Damon, signed off on movements around the clinic road after midnight. The name slid into the corridor like a knife. Damon. Sienna had heard it before. At the event launch, one of the older staff had murmured it while speaking about the house manager who had once controlled all estate logistics before stepping into a quieter advisory role. She looked at Mama Vivian. You knew him? The old woman's expression darkened. Too well. Grayson continued, more grim now. None of this proves Vanessa orchestrated anything, but it proves the past was touched by deliberate hands. Deliberate hands. That phrase settled heavily in Sienna's chest. Not fate, not chaos. Hands. People. Choices. Behind the glass, Nadia stirred weakly in bed as a nurse adjusted her oxygen line. Sienna turned immediately, instincts pulling her toward the room. Then the doctor from earlier approached with a tablet. You are Sienna, yes? She is stable for now, he said. There is severe infection and advanced lung damage, but the intervention started in time. We will keep her overnight and monitor how she responds. Sienna shut her eyes briefly. Not relief, exactly. Relief was too complete a word, but something near it. Something that allowed breath to return without permission. Can I see her? For a minute. No stress. She needs rest. Sienna nodded and took one step, then paused as the doctor added, There is one more thing. All 3 Canes looked at him now. We ran routine blood grouping and family history intake to prepare for possible transfusion needs. The file attached to your case included a private request from Mrs. Cane's office. He nodded toward Mama Vivian for comparative DNA analysis if consent became possible. Sienna turned sharply. You what? Mama Vivian lifted her chin. I arranged the possibility, not the theft of your choice. Grayson stepped in before the spark became flame. No one has tested anything without consent. The doctor held up a hand. Correct. We need written approval from both parties. The corridor went silent again. There it was, the door, not rumor now, not resemblance, not pendant and frightened memories and overwritten logs. Science. A line crossed or refused. Sienna looked from the doctor to Mama Vivian, then to Grayson. His face was unreadable, but no longer dismissive. If anything, he looked as if the ground beneath his name had begun to move. What happens? Sienna asked slowly. If I say no, Mama Vivian answered without hesitation, then no one touches a strand of your hair. And if I say yes? Grayson spoke this time. Then we stopped guessing. Sienna stared at the glass room where Nadia lay sleeping under hospital light. The woman who raised her. The woman who hid the truth. The woman who had chosen her life over the law because law in that moment may have meant death. Then she looked at the old woman with the twin pendant, then at the CEO, whose face mirrored hers so precisely it no longer felt like coincidence. Her voice, when it came, was low but steady. I will do the test. Mama Vivian closed her eyes for one brief second, as though bracing herself against hope. The doctor nodded. I will bring the forms. As he walked away, Sienna felt no triumph, only terror sharpened into purpose, because if the blood confirmed what the eyes already feared, then she was not just a poor girl with a strange resemblance anymore. She was proof, and proof in wealthy families could get people killed. The DNA samples were taken just after sunrise. A nurse swabbed the inside of Sienna's cheek with practiced calm, as if she were collecting nothing more than ordinary cells. Another sample had already been taken from Mama Vivian under private supervision, and a comparative family reference was being authorized through Grayson to speed the process. Everything happened quietly, efficiently, legally, and still it felt like treason. Sienna sat in a small consultation room afterward, staring at the sealed evidence pouch on the metal tray. It was absurd that something so small could threaten to rearrange an entire life. A few invisible strands, a few hidden markers, a verdict written in blood long before language. She should have felt curiosity. Instead, she felt exposed, because once the test was done, she could no longer pretend this was only a rich family's obsession. She had stepped across the line herself now. Whatever came next would no longer belong only to them. When the nurse left, the room grew too quiet. Sienna rested her elbows on her knees and pressed her hands together hard enough to whiten her knuckles. She could hear muffled hospital sounds through the wall, wheels rolling, shoes squeaking, a monitor beeping steadily somewhere nearby. Life and illness continuing in indifferent rhythm. The door opened. Grayson entered without haste, but without softness either. He had taken off his jacket. His sleeves were folded once at the forearms, revealing the first signs that the perfect CEO exterior had started to crack under real strain. He closed the door behind him. Sienna did not stand. Are you here to tell me what to do next? She asked. No. He remained by the door for a second, studying her face as if he was still trying to separate resemblance from fact. Finally, he crossed the room and sat in the chair opposite hers, leaving enough space to avoid insult. I am here, he said, because if what Nadia said is true, then last night was not just a family scandal. It was evidence of attempted murder. Sienna lifted her eyes slowly. You say that so cleanly. How should I say it? She gave a tired laugh. Like a human being. His expression changed by a degree. Not much. Enough. I do not know how to say it any other way yet. That answer disarmed her more than a polished apology would have. Sienna leaned back and crossed her arms. Then start with what you found. Grayson nodded once. I went through the original accident file myself before dawn. The public version says my aunt Ariana died when her car lost control during a storm on the expressway. The driver died. The infant was allegedly ejected in the chaos and presumed taken by floodwater. Sienna's stomach turned. Presumed? Yes. So nobody proved anything? No. They declared tragedy faster than they investigated it. She stared at him. He continued, his tone clipped, but no longer cold. The more private records tell a different story. Ariana had left the family estate in a hurry that night after an argument. Her route should have taken her straight to her husband's apartment. Instead, phone records place her near a discreet medical annex owned through shell companies linked to our family holdings. Why would she go there? Grayson's jaw tightened. That is what I needed to know. He took a folder from under his arm and slid it across the small table between them. Sienna hesitated before opening it. Inside were photocopied records, transaction sheets, old photographs, printouts of emails, duty rosters. It looked less like family memory than the anatomy of a lie. This annex, Grayson said, tapping one page, was used for private consultations no one wanted attached to the main family hospital. Staff were rotated quietly. Security access was controlled by one office only. Sienna looked up. Damon. Yes. The name settled with ugly weight. He oversaw all after-hours movement, Grayson said. Car security gates, private corridor access, camera storage. If footage disappeared that night, he would know how. If logs were altered, he would know where. Sienna turned to another page and found a blurred copy of an old employee roster. Damon's name sat near the bottom. Below it, handwritten initials authorized by someone else. Her eyes narrowed. Who signed this? Grayson was silent for a beat too long. Then he answered, Vanessa. Sienna looked at him sharply. So Nadia was right. She may have been. May? His voice hardened slightly. I am not protecting her. I am being precise. Sienna dropped the folder onto the table. Precision is a luxury for people whose lives are not spent being disbelieved. That struck home. Grayson exhaled once, slow, fair. He leaned forward now, forearms on his knees, all executive polish reduced to concentration and fatigue. Listen to me. I believed this was coincidence. Then I believed it might be family grief looking for shape. But Vanessa's name appears too often in places it should not. She approved vehicle access that night. She authorized a private cash withdrawal days later. And the driver who quit after the accident received money through an intermediary account tied to one of her personal assistants. Sienna felt cold sprayed slowly through her arms. She paid people, yes, to kill a baby. Grayson's mouth tightened, or to erase one. The room fell silent. Sienna looked back down at the papers, but the words had begun to blur. Not from weakness, from fury. From the growing horror of realizing that her life had not merely started in poverty, it had been pushed there, deliberately, carefully, by hands that returned afterward to dine under chandeliers and speak about legacy. Why? She asked. Grayson answered immediately this time. Power. He reached for one of the photocopies and turned it toward her. An old memo. A legal consultation note. Partial, but enough. My aunt Ariana had discovered that her husband was moving company assets through off-book partnerships. She also intended to amend part of her inheritance structure after her daughter was born. If she filed, the new arrangement shares and family protections would shift toward her child. Sienna stared at him. And Vanessa was not yet where she wanted to be in the family. She had influence, but not enough. If Ariana's child lived and remained acknowledged, the child would become a protected branch of the bloodline with long-term claim and leverage. Vanessa's future and the future of anyone tied to her rise would narrow. Something bitter twisted in Sienna's chest. So, she solved the problem. Grayson did not soften it. That is what it looks like. A knock sounded on the door. Ivy stepped in quietly. Mama Vivian is with Nadia. The doctor says she is awake, but weak. Sienna rose at once, but Ivy's next words stopped her. There is more. One of the archive clerks called back. He found a sealed disciplinary note from years ago. Damon was almost dismissed once for failure to complete an instruction of a sensitive personal nature. The note was buried and never filed publicly. Grayson stood. Failure to complete, he repeated. Ivy nodded. No details. Just that phrase. Sienna felt the meaning before anyone said it aloud. Damon had been ordered to finish something. He had not finished it. Not completely. Grayson's face had gone very still. Get me the original and find out who buried the note. Ivy nodded and withdrew. For a moment, neither he nor Sienna moved. Then Sienna said, He did not kill me. No. He left me there. Yes. Why? Grayson looked at the closed door after Ivy, then back at her. Cowardice. Conscience. Fear. Any of the three could look the same at midnight. Sienna gave a small laugh with no humor in it. And rich people call that mercy afterward. He did not argue. They walked together to Nadia's room in silence. The hallway windows were full of hot morning light now. Nurses crossed in and out of rooms. A cleaner pushed a cart past them, humming under her breath. Life continued because life always continued even when one truth after another fell like walls. Inside the room, Mama Vivian sat beside the bed, her cane resting against the chair, one hand lightly over Nadia's wrist. It was a startling image. Wealth and poverty, blood and choice. The old woman who might be connected by lineage and the old woman who had done the raising. Neither looked victorious. Nadia's eyes lifted weakly to Sienna when she entered, then to Grayson. Fear flickered again. Sienna moved to the bedside at once. It is all right. Nadia's cracked lips shifted. No, it is not. Mama Vivian glanced at Grayson. One look was enough. He placed the folder on the side table and opened it to the page bearing Vanessa's authorization signature. Nadia saw it. Her hand began to tremble. That one, she whispered. That is the woman. Grayson leaned in, voice controlled. You are sure? Nadia shut her eyes and nodded once. Older now, polished now, but yes. Mama Vivian's face altered in a way Sienna would remember for years. Not just grief, not just rage, betrayal entering bone. The realization that evil had not come from the gate, but from the dining table. She sat in my house, the old woman said softly. She called me mother. Nadia looked ashamed for reasons that were never hers to carry. I was afraid. Mama Vivian turned to her. And you kept my great-granddaughter alive. The words hung in the room. Sienna went still. Great-granddaughter. No test result had returned yet. No lab technician had spoken. No formal confirmation existed. And yet, no one in that room seemed able to pretend any longer that this was only theory. Grayson straightened. There is one more thing. He turned another page in the file. A bank transfer ledger. Large numbers quietly moved. The cash withdrawal authorized after the accident did not go only to the driver. There were two payments. One to an intermediary, the other to an account linked later to a rural property trust. Mama Vivian's eyes narrowed. What property? Grayson met her gaze. A safe house, one Vanessa kept off the family books. Sienna felt a chill. A place for what? He answered without blinking. For hiding evidence or people. Silence swallowed the room whole because now the story had changed again. This was no longer only about a baby left to die and a family lie buried by time. If Vanessa had kept a secret property, then perhaps not every witness from that night had vanished. Perhaps Damon had not been the only loose end. Perhaps somewhere in some locked room or forgotten ledger or frightened old servant's memory, the final pieces were still waiting. Sienna looked at the folder, then at the two older women, then at Grayson. Her voice came out low and steady. Then we go there. Grayson shook his head immediately. No, not we. Sienna's stare sharpened. You think I will sit here while you investigate my life for me? I think if Vanessa realizes how much we know, she will move first. Mama Vivian rose slowly from her chair, pain and authority blending into one commanding posture. Then we stop whispering, she said, before she buries the rest. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Sienna saw it clearly. The richest woman in the family was no longer trying to protect its name. She was preparing to destroy whatever had been built on its lies. By late afternoon, the press hall at Kane Group headquarters glowed with curated virtue. A wall of blue and gold banners carried the foundation slogan in flawless lettering. Cameras lined the rear risers. Politicians, donors, school administrators, and business partners filled the rows of chairs with practice importance. Soft, instrumental music floated through hidden speakers. On the giant screen behind the stage, smiling children in school uniforms looked out over the crowd like proof that wealth had a conscience. It would have been beautiful if it had not been built on rot. Sienna stood in a private waiting room behind the stage, staring at her reflection in a tall mirror she had not asked for. Someone from Mama Vivian's staff had brought her a simple cream dress, not flashy, not jeweled, just clean, elegant, and impossible for the room to mistake as an accident. Sienna had resisted wearing it. Then she remembered the marble floor, the hands on her arm, the eyes that had judged her before her mouth opened. So she put it on, not to become one of them, to deny them the comfort of dismissing her again. Behind her, Ivy adjusted the edge of the sleeve and stepped back. You look strong. Sienna kept her eyes on the mirror. I look borrowed. No, Ivy said quietly. You look seen. Sienna did not answer. Across the room, Grayson was on the phone, his tone low and sharp. He had been moving since morning like a man holding a fire behind his ribs. Earlier, the DNA result had arrived under sealed priority handling. Positive. Direct familial match. Not a rumor, not resemblance, not grief. Blood. Mama Vivian had closed her eyes when she read it. Then she had handed the report to Grayson without a word. He had read it once, jaw locked, read it again, then looked at Sienna with a silence heavier than any apology. He had not said, You were right. He had not said, I was wrong. He had said something stranger. We move now. And that had been enough. The safe house record had also been confirmed. A rural property held through two shell entities and a retired trustee. No children there now. No living witness found yet. But there were archive maintenance logs, a dismissed caretaker, and one recovered lockbox from an estate office. Inside it, a flash drive, an old phone, and copies of private payment records tied to Vanessa's former assistant and Damon. It was not every answer. It was enough to break a dynasty open. The door to the waiting room opened. Mama Vivian entered in black silk and pearls, carrying no visible grief now, only judgment. The room changed around her. Even the assistants seemed to breathe more carefully. She looked first at Sienna. For a second, the billionaire, the matriarch, the feared builder of an empire disappeared. What remained was an old woman seeing the child history had thrown away and somehow failed to kill. Then the moment closed. Are you ready? She asked. Sienna swallowed. No. Mama Vivian nodded. Good. Only fools feel ready for truth in public. Grayson ended his call and crossed the room. The media feed is live. Once we step out, there is no private version of this. Mama Vivian's gaze sharpened. There never should have been. He gave the smallest nod. Ivy moved to the side table and handed Mama Vivian a thin folder. Another copy of the DNA result. The transaction trails, security authorizations, Damon's recorded statement from earlier. That had been the final blow. They had found him in a guest annex owned quietly outside Abuja, half drunk, half retired, and fully terrified. The first time Grayson confronted him, Damon denied everything. Then he saw the payment records, saw the signature logs, saw the old disciplinary memo pulled from burial. And when Mama Vivian herself entered the room and asked him whether he had carried her great-grandchild into a storm, the old man broke. He admitted the order, not with courage, with collapse. Vanessa had instructed him to remove the child from the family line forever. He had staged vehicle movements after Ariana's death, taken the baby from the annex route, driven to the drainage road, and left her there wrapped in cloth. He had told himself the storm would finish what he could not. Later, when he learned the child had vanished from where he left her, he kept quiet. Vanessa paid him, promoted him, and tied his silence to comfort. Cowardice had grown old in luxury. Now, it was all in his statement. The stage manager appeared at the door. Mrs. Kane, we begin in moments. Mama Vivian took the folder and turned to Sienna one last time. Once I speak, they will look at you as if they have the right to witness your pain. Remember that they do not. Sienna met her eyes. Then, why do this publicly? Grayson answered before Mama Vivian could. Because Vanessa survives in private, Mama Vivian added, and because lies raised in public should die there too. The music outside faded. Applause rose. The foundation host was introducing Mama Vivian to the stage. Grayson stepped closer to Sienna, voice low. You do not have to say anything unless you choose to. She almost laughed. That sounds generous coming from a family that has been speaking over my life for years. His face tightened. Fair. Then, after a beat, still true, the host finished. The applause swelled. Mama Vivian walked out first, upright despite age, each step measured, cane tapping softly against the floor like a metronome for judgment. Grayson followed. Sienna stood alone for seconds in the doorway's shadow, hearing the crowd cheer for a version of the Kane family that was already dead. Then, Ivy touched her elbow lightly, and Sienna walked into the light. The applause changed the moment people saw her. Some recognized her from the launch, others only saw what Mama Vivian had seen days earlier. The face, the eyes, the impossible echo of Grayson in feminine form. Murmurs rippled across the hall like wind disturbing dry leaves. Mama Vivian did not sit. She stood at the podium and let the room quiet itself. I was invited today, she began, her voice carrying effortlessly through the hall, to speak about education, opportunity, and the moral duty of wealth. The audience smiled politely. Pens lifted, cameras steadied. But before wealth can speak of duty, she said it must answer for its sins. The room froze. Grayson stood off to one side of the stage, expression carved from control. Sienna remained farther back, every muscle tense, hands cold despite the stage lights. Mama Vivian opened the folder. Years ago, my daughter Ariana died under circumstances my family accepted too quickly and questioned too little. Her infant child disappeared that same night. We were told the storm took her. We were told the road swallowed her. We were told grief should learn obedience. Now, nobody moved at all. At the front row, Vanessa sat in a silver suit, immaculate, composed, one hand resting lightly over the other. Only her eyes had sharpened. Mama Vivian turned a page. This week, truth returned in the form of a young woman dragged and humiliated outside my own event. A young woman accused of theft while the guilty stood dressed in silk. A young woman whose face carries my blood. Gasps broke across the hall. Vanessa rose halfway from her seat. Mama, sit down. The command cracked like a whip, and to everyone's astonishment, Vanessa did. Mama Vivian lifted a paper. DNA analysis confirms that Sienna, she turned, extending one hand toward her, is my lost great-granddaughter. The room erupted. Questions shouted. Cameras flashed wildly. People twisted in their chairs to stare at Sienna as if she were now more spectacle than human. She felt heat rush to her face, but she did not lower her head. Not this time. Not ever again. Then Vanessa stood fully. This is absurd, she said, voice ringing clear, offended. Elegant. Practiced. With respect, Mama Vivian has been manipulated by a girl coached to exploit grief. A private lab report can be forged. I will not allow this family's name to be hijacked by an opportunist from the gutter. The word hit the room like acid. Sienna felt something primal rise in her. Not shame now, but fury so clean it almost felt holy. Before she could move, Grayson stepped forward and took the central microphone. You should be careful with the word forged, he said. Voice cool and precise. It invites attention to records. Vanessa turned sharply toward him. Grayson. He held up a second folder. Vehicle access authorizations from the week of Ariana's death. Security override signed by you. Cash transfers routed through your former assistant to Damon, then head of estate security. A disciplinary note documenting his failure to complete a sensitive personal instruction, and a recorded statement from Damon himself. The hall went silent again, more terrible than before. Vanessa's poise cracked by a fraction. You are making a catastrophic mistake. No, Grayson said. I am correcting one. He signaled to the technical team. On the giant screen behind them appeared document scans, dates, signatures, account movements, then audio. Damon's broken voice filled the hall. She told me the child must disappear. She said no one would question a storm. I left the baby by the drainage road. I could not kill her with my own hands. A woman in the audience cried out softly. Someone cursed under his breath. Reporters surged toward the front until security blocked the aisles. Vanessa looked around the hall and realized, perhaps for the first time in decades, that money could not buy back a moment once it broke in public. She pointed at Sienna with a hand that had begun to shake. Do you know what this is? She spat. This girl is not family. She is a contamination. People like her spend their whole lives reaching upward with dirty hands. And now you want to place her beside us because of one sentimental old woman and one weak old servant. Enough. This time it was Sienna. She stepped to the front of the stage, took the microphone from its stand, and faced the woman who had once ordered her death before she could speak her first word. The whole watched, breathless. Sienna's voice trembled on the first line, then steadied with every word. You called me gutter like it was an insult, she said, but the gutter is where I was left to die by people dressed exactly like you. No one moved. My mother, she emphasized the word, and the camera swung closer, worked herself sick to keep me alive. She fed me before herself. She hid me because she believed the rich would finish what they started. Vanessa tried to interrupt. You little, and now Sienna cut in louder. You stand in front of all these people and prove she was right. The silence afterward was enormous. Then Mama Vivian spoke one final time, each word deliberate. Vanessa Kane, from this moment you are stripped of all authority, all representation, and all protection under this family name. The evidence has been turned over to the police. At the rear doors of the hall, uniformed officers appeared. For the first time, real fear entered Vanessa's face. Not outrage, not arrogance, fear. It was not enough to heal anything, but it was justice beginning. The first sound after, Vanessa saw the police was not a scream. It was laughter. Small, sharp, unbelieving. The kind of laughter a person makes when reality has finally become too humiliating to deny. Then it broke. Do you know who you are destroying? She shouted, stumbling backward as officers moved down the aisle. Do you have any idea what this family will lose if this becomes a criminal spectacle? Mama Vivian did not blink. It became criminal years ago. The officers reached the front row. Reporters surged like a living wall behind them, cameras flashing so fast the stage seemed caught in a storm of artificial lightning. Donors were whispering. Executives stared into the wreckage of a legacy they had worshipped all afternoon. Politicians who had arrived smiling now looked desperate to distance themselves from the front seats. And in the center of it all stood Sienna, not rescued, not elevated, exposed. It was a strange thing to watch justice arrive and still feel grief standing close behind it. Vanessa jerked her arm away when the first officer tried to take hold of her. Do not touch me. Her voice cracked on the last word. That was the moment everyone in the room understood it was over. Arrogance could survive accusation. It could survive rumor. It could even survive evidence for a few seconds if pride was strong enough. But once pride cracked into panic, power lost its costume. Grayson stepped forward, his face colder than Sienna had ever seen it. Cooperate. Vanessa turned to him as if betrayal had taken human shape in his body. After everything I built for this family. He did not flinch. You built nothing. You buried people and called it order. The words hit with brutal precision. Vanessa's mouth opened, closed, opened again. For one strange second, she looked not dangerous, but old in the wrong way, aged by greed, hollowed by years of maintaining control through fear. Then the officers took her wrists and the illusion shattered completely. As they led her away, she twisted once more toward Mama Vivian. This girl will ruin you, she hissed. You think bringing street blood into this house will cleanse it? She will only remind everyone what you failed to protect. Mama Vivian's voice came back low and iron hard. Then let every reminder stand. The police escorted Vanessa out through a side aisle as the room erupted into shouting. Some reporters called questions after her. Some shouted at Mama Vivian. Others turned immediately to Sienna, smelling the better headline, Lost Heiress Found, CEO's twin-faced cousin, Billionaire Family Murder Scandal. Human pain always sold fastest when dressed in family wealth. Ivy moved quickly to block the nearest cameras from reaching Sienna directly. Grayson signaled security to clear a path. But before anyone could usher her away, Sienna saw something in the audience that stopped her cold. Near the back row, one of the catering women from the launch stood frozen with a tray in her hands. She was the same woman who had looked away when Sienna was accused, the same woman who had whispered with the others while guards held her arm. Now, shame had drained all color from her face. Sienna looked at her for only a second, but the woman lowered her eyes immediately. Good, Sienna thought. Not because humiliation was sweet, because witness mattered. Let them all remember that the girl they dragged like dirt had been telling the truth before truth became fashionable. The next hour passed like a fever dream. Lawyers arrived. Statements were requested. Senior staff were pulled into side rooms. The board chair of the Kane Foundation nearly fainted when he learned the police wanted access to archive financial movements. The public relations director kept whispering the word containment until Mama Vivian silenced him with one sentence. We are not containing truth. We are surviving it. Sienna sat in a private conference room with a bottle of water she could not drink and 3 people who now seemed tied to her life, whether she liked it or not. Mama Vivian, Grayson, and Ivy. The giant city spread beyond the windows in a blur of glass towers and traffic haze. Somewhere below, People were already reading news alerts about the scandal. Somewhere farther away in the settlement, neighbors were probably repeating her name with disbelief. Sienna's head ached. Mama Vivian removed her glasses and pressed fingers briefly to the bridge of her nose. For the first time all evening, she looked tired enough for age to show honestly. The police will want a fuller statement from Nadia when she is stronger, she said. Sienna stiffened. She is not leaving that hospital tonight. She will not? Grayson said. I have already assigned independent legal counsel and a medical advocate. No one gets access without clearance. Sienna looked at him sharply. You do like making decisions for everyone. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. You prefer chaos? I prefer being asked. Something in him softened then, or perhaps corrected itself. He nodded once. Fair. The room fell quiet again. Then Mama Vivian turned to Sienna fully. There is something I must say before lawyers poison every human sentence in this matter. Sienna met her gaze warily. The old woman's voice lowered. I do not expect forgiveness because blood has spoken. I do not expect closeness because science confirmed what my eyes already feared. And I will not insult you by pretending a family can claim you in one day after failing to protect you for years. The honesty of it pierced more deeply than ceremony would have. Mama Vivian went on. But I am sorry. Not in the cheap way wealthy people use apology when they want pain to become manageable. I am sorry as a woman who built power and still left a child unguarded inside it. Sienna stared at her. A part of her wanted to remain hard, to say that sorrow changed nothing, to say that every soft word from a powerful person still arrived too late. But another part, tired, raw, honest, had seen the old woman's hand shake over a tiny gold pendant, had seen the fury in her when truth surfaced, had seen that public destruction of Vanessa cost her something real. So, Sienna answered carefully. You did fail. Mama Vivian nodded, accepting the blade. But you are not the only one who failed me. Sienna said, and you are also not the one who raised me. At that, something gentler entered the old woman's face. No, she said, that honor belongs to Nadia. Honor, not inconvenience, not complication. Honor. Sienna had not expected that word from her. Grayson spoke next more awkwardly than she would have believed possible for a man who commanded boardrooms. The house in Ikoyi is secured. Vanessa's office has been locked. Damon is in custody. The Foundation Board will issue a temporary suspension of all ceremonial activity until the criminal investigation is complete. Sienna blinked. You speak like you are reading the news. He almost smiled. Almost. If I stop speaking like that right now, I may start throwing furniture. That startled a short laugh out of Ivy before she could stop herself. Even Sienna felt the corner of her mouth move. Just once. Just enough to remind her she was still human under all this wreckage. Later, near midnight, they returned to St. Catherine's. The city outside the hospital had quieted into that strange Lagos half-silence, where engines still growled, but the sky finally belonged to darkness. The ward lights were dimmer now. The corridors smelled of antiseptic and overworked air conditioning. Nurses moved softly past sleeping rooms. Nadia was awake, weak, pale, and frightened by the television mounted high in the room, which mercifully had been turned off before Sienna entered. The older woman's eyes went immediately to her daughter's face, searching for damage deeper than injury. Sienna went to her first. Always first. I am here. Nadia's gaze filled at once. What happened? Sienna sat beside the bed and took her hand. The truth stopped hiding. Nadia studied her face more closely, then looked beyond her and saw Mama Vivian standing quietly near the foot of the bed, saw Grayson near the door, saw the shape of changed history filling the room. Fear returned. I never wanted to lose her, Nadia whispered. Mama Vivian answered before Sienna could. And you will not. Nadia looked stunned. The old billionaire moved closer slowly, as if approaching sacred ground. You kept her alive when someone in my family wanted her dead. You fed her. You protected her. Whatever the blood says, you are her mother in the way that mattered most. Nadia began to cry silently. Sienna's throat tightened so hard it hurt. No court ruling, no DNA document, no public statement could have given her what that sentence gave in that moment. Recognition. Justice was not only punishing evil, it was naming love correctly. Grayson stepped forward then, quieter than usual. The specialist reviewed her scans again. There is a treatment plan. It will be long, but possible. Sienna looked up sharply. Possible? He nodded. Yes. She shut eyes. Not healed, not safe, but possible. For people like her, possibility had always felt like luxury. Tonight it felt like mercy that had finally learned to walk faster. The next days would be brutal. Police interviews, media storms, board revolts, court filings, questions about inheritance, identity, guardianship, and scandal. The world would claw at the story until it bled headlines. But in that hospital room for one fragile hour, none of that reached them. Mama Vivian sat in the visitor's chair. Nadia held Sienna's hand. Grayson stood by the window in tired silence, no longer looking at Sienna like a threat to manage, but like a truth he was still learning how to protect. And Sienna, who had spent her whole life being thrown to the edge of other people's comfort, sat between the woman who had given her blood and the woman who had given her bread, understanding at last that family was not one thing. It was not only birth. It was not only name. It was who searched, who stayed, who told the truth when lies had paid better for years. Later, when the first storm of scandal had passed and the courts had formally charged Vanessa and reopened Ariana's case, Mama Vivian held a small private ceremony in the garden of the Kane estate. No reporters, no banners, no diamonds flashing for cameras, only closed witnesses, only truth. There, before the household staff, legal representatives, and a few trusted elders, she introduced Sienna, not as a rescued girl, not as a miracle, not as a headline, but as her great-granddaughter and as the daughter of Nadia, who would forever remain part of the family she had protected at great personal cost. Sienna accepted neither as a queen nor as a beggar. She accepted them as herself, and when she later chose to use the family resources to fund a clinic wing for low-income women and children in the district where she had grown up, even Grayson looked at her with something like awe. Not because she had inherited power, because she had decided what kind of power it should become. The family was not healed, not fully. Some wounds deserved scars, but the silence was broken. The guilty had fallen. The abandoned child had returned standing, and for the first time in years, the Kane name did not sound like a monument. It sounded like a promise still being earned. Life has a strange way of proving that the truth can be buried, but it can never stay buried forever. This story reminds us that blood may connect people by birth, but love, sacrifice, and loyalty are what truly make someone family. Nadia was not the woman who gave Sienna life, yet she was the one who stayed awake through the nights, endured hunger so her daughter could eat, and loved her when the whole world would have let her die. In the end, that is what motherhood truly means. Not who gave birth to you, but who chooses you every single day. We also learned that evil may seem powerful for a season, but no lie lasts forever. Vanessa had wealth, status, and influence, yet none of it could save her when the truth finally came into the light. Because sooner or later, betrayal destroys itself. And no matter how long injustice hides behind money, beauty, or power, karma always remembers the address. But perhaps the most beautiful lesson of all is this: your beginning does not define your worth. Sienna was abandoned in a gutter, raised in poverty, and treated like she was nothing. Yet known of that change who she truly was. Her value was never determined by where she started, but by the strength, dignity, and kindness she carried through her suffering. Sometimes the people the world looks down on are the ones with the purest hearts. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments. What do you think truly makes someone family? Blood, love, or sacrifice? We would love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoy emotional stories with powerful lessons and unforgettable twists, do not forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next journey.